I really, really struggle with it. The reason being is, we often get that random question, right? How many HR FTE should you have per employee, right? Or, what's the cost of this role, or what's, an org size and, span and controls and layers. And while there are benchmarks, the reality is everyone's business is different, right? Their industry, their locations, their corporate culture, there's so many variables that can take it into account that the benchmarks become interesting, but they're no longer benchmarks, right? I mean, now, but that's historically been kind of the thought process, right? Well, now go to what I was talking about on the SEC the impending SEC regulations, or what's happening in the EU. Well, we're now publicly going to start seeing HR metrics disclosed in the market, right, between companies of like business models. So as a result, let's make believe an example of, what's the training spend per employee. Well, if you take 5 companies that are similar revenue, let's say all in the aerospace industry, and one's $5,000 in training, per employee, and the other 4, let's say $15,000, that's going to spark a question, right? And so as a result, this, this public review is going to kind of force the industry back into, well, what are the benchmarks? Now, my hope is we end up with some sort of mix of, the benchmarks are not benchmarks like these are, if you're not here, it's bad, right? But it's an indication from a compass needle, right? And as long as you understand why you're either leading or lagging the market in terms of that benchmark, then I think that's the right conversation to have. But it's going to be a challenge for us not to fall into, well, here's the benchmark, and if you're not here, that's that's a problem.
Right.
Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with everything Franz is saying. I would also add that it depends on the objective as well. So, I mean, where does benchmarking fit into extended workforce analytics? If sometimes it can be twofold. You can look at across all your current state roles. What are you paying versus the market? And identifying maybe where there's potential opportunity from a performance and cost perspective. And then there's also, to me, where I think from my perspective, it can be really effective is if benchmarking is incorporated at the time of sourcing. So when you're looking for the worker, when you're negotiating with the supplier, having benchmarks at your fingertips to be able to leverage while you're going through a sourcing event can be very, very impactful, and it's proactive versus reactive. So it's not looking back and saying, oh, dang, I should renegotiate this rate.
Sure.
And then there's things like rate cards, right? Where we have rate cards with suppliers, being able to use benchmarks to look at those rate cards. Are they competitive? So I think, to answer it directly, I think it depends on the objective, but I think there's various areas you can fit it in. With the most effective way to fit it in is at the time it's you're doing a sourcing event.
Great example. So that, because we're talking about total talent, right? Total workforce. Well, one of the first starting points is, how do you figure out what % of your organization, from a strategic guidance perspective, should be, contractors, right? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And I mean, I shared with you kind of the SIA number of 15 to 22% is kind of the norms, right? There are industries where over 50% of their headcount are contractors, right? And the question has nothing to do with the math, right? Of this is the right answer. Just think about it from a company culture perspective. If a company is not used to really building loyalty and building engagement with their contractors, and they use contractors as a body shop, right? Then that's not an organization where you'd say you ought to be doing the 30% or 40% or 50% of your org ought to be a contractor, right? They've got to go through a culture and leadership changing and hiring manager training in terms of here's how you maximize it. You may have another organization where they know how to do this, right? And so to your point, there's so many things underneath those numbers that, this is where the power of having that holistic view is much more important. Otherwise, you could just arbitrarily pick the wrong benchmark, right? And you just create all sorts of operational challenges.